Welcome, friends, Barikalust Angernar, to this event co-hosted between the Armenian Institute in London and the FAST Foundation in Armenia. The event tonight is part of the Armenian Institute series of events celebrating Women's History Month for International Women's Day on the 8th of March. So we're really excited for the panel and very glad that all of you could join us. I'll hand over shortly to my colleague Tatiana Deravedisyan to introduce the event itself, the evening itself. But just so that everyone is aware, we're recording the event tonight and it will be uploaded onto the Armenian Institute's YouTube page, and we're also live streaming on Facebook. So if you would prefer not to, you shouldn't appear on any of the recordings because we're using a spotlight function, but if you'd like to make absolutely sure, then please do make use of the stop video function. We'll also be sharing some links into the chat, and please feel free to use the chat function to ask questions and to make comments, also to introduce where you're joining from, and the same for friends who are joining us on Facebook. If you use the comment function on the live stream, then we'll be able to pass your questions on to the panel. But without any further ado, Tatiana, please.
Good evening, and again, thank you everyone for joining. My name is Tatiana Deravedisyan, and I'm a trustee of the Armenian Institute. My fellow trustee, Stephen Masters, and I will jointly be hosting this evening's discussion. Tonight, we're going to shine a light on women working in science and innovation in Armenia. This event, as Nick mentioned, is in collaboration with the Foundation for Armenian Science and Technology, and we're really pleased to be working with them. For those of you that don't know the Armenian Institute, we are a UK registered arts and culture charity. Our aim is to make Armenian culture and history a living experience. We run talks like these, salons, book reviews and presentations, concerts, language classes, and many more. We have one of the largest collections of Armenian books in Europe, and we hope that when we return to some semblance of normality, you will be able to visit our library in London. For those of you that do know us, we have just launched a survey, and in the chat, you'll find the link to it, and we would very much appreciate your feedback. This will help us to improve what we already do. And if you'd like to donate to our current library fundraiser, you can do so through this link too. That's in the chat as well. This is to help digitize our library of 8,000 books. So Armenia is enjoying somewhat of a renaissance in science and innovation, and women are playing a major role in this, whether they are the inventors, innovators, or implementers. More women than ever are working in this sector. So we've invited speakers from across the sector to participate in this discussion and help us shine a light on their achievements and contributions, while also remembering the notable women of the past. Stephen?
Hello, everyone. So, yes, so we've been planning this for a little while, so I'm looking forward to this. So the plan for this evening is to try and cover a few key areas initially around the history of science and technology in Armenia, but from Soviet times when Armenia was a center for designing and building computers, and when organizations such as Yesrim were set up. We'll also be looking at education in Armenia and the academic research, and how it is to actually start a business, and what are the opportunities there, and what's investment looking like. It certainly seems pretty healthy at the moment. We have a panel of speakers with us this evening. First we have Suzanna Shamakhyan, who is the Vice President of Partnerships and Programs at the Foundation for Armenian Science and Technology, that's FAST. She'll be providing our keynote this evening, which we'll be looking forward to, providing a bit of a background to this whole subject. And then we'll have a panel where we'll be asking questions with Naira Hovakimian, who's the W. Grafton and Lillian B. Wilkins Professor at the University of Illinois. We have Manik Evogyan, who is PR and Communications Manager at Service Titan in Armenia. And we have Nari Gevorkian, who is the co-founder and chief design officer at Embrytech, sort of a relatively recent startup in Armenia. So I think with that, let's hand over to Suzanna, please, to lead the way with our keynote.
Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here and very happy that FAST is co-organizing this amazing webinar here. I'll be trying to provide in very concise time frame what the prehistory of Armenian science and technology ecosystem is, and where currently the country is, and where we believe its potential lays as well. And then I'm sure the amazing women we have in the panel will share more practically how it is, what does it mean to be a scientist and entrepreneur in Armenia, a woman scientist and entrepreneur today, what challenges they have, and what different opportunities they think they will have in the future and for the aspiring entrepreneurs. I'm sharing my screen. I hope you see it. Please let me know if you don't. And I'll try to jump in quite fast. So, innovative Armenia, the past and the future. First of all, I mean, as Stephen was mentioning, Armenia has a very interesting legacy when it comes to the Soviet era, and many have called Armenia the Soviet Silicon Valley now when they were assessing the history. And here it's quite interesting to try to analyze how all of this has happened. In Soviet time, Armenia was responsible for 30% of the defense electronics R&D, including software development, industrial computing. The first, Soviet computer systems were designed in tiny Armenia. That obviously previously wasn't on the science and innovation map. By the end of Soviet Union in 1990s, this small country had over 22,000 researchers working in 130 scientific institutions, and this was basically created from scratch. When it comes to women participation, it is also quite interesting. During Soviet times, women had heavy participation in science, especially when it comes to physics, astrophysics, and mathematics, computer sciences. When it comes to computer science, interesting stats, for example, in Yerevan State University, the computer science department steadily has 75% of women in the class. And then later on, obviously, continuing through career. Now, when it comes to that number, it's also interesting because this number has declined later on in time, now in the reality, and throughout time it has turned into 44%. But the absolute number remained more or less the same. It was the men participation that increased when it comes to the sort of headcount of people that was involved. So that said, there was a lot of things going on, and an interesting thing to mention here is the R&D expenditure graphs. As many of you might know, R&D expenditure is an important component when it comes to identifying what the innovativeness rate or rank is in the country and how much the country puts emphasis on it. And here you can see in the graph that in 1990, right before the Soviet Union collapsed, Armenia's expenditure was very high. It was 2.5% of GDP, and it was only the second, to Russia in the entire Soviet Union. And interestingly, this number is now higher than the world average of today, which is quite amazing. That said, you can imagine how much money was being injected into the system, and definitely that had a big impact, both in terms of human capital development and infrastructure and the research output. Now, unfortunately, you can see the drastic drop right in the end of 90s and 91, and obviously the Soviet Union collapse had its big impact, but also So the war in Artsakh and the earthquake of 80 AD has brought the country in general into the economic and financial collapse. That obviously had a huge spillover effect on science and technology as well, in more or less three ways. One was that most talented ones were leaving the country. The second, obviously, was that many have been forced out of academia, and they had to recalibrate to do other things to survive, obviously, and some of them have remained in the system, and it's more of an inertia thing that remained. Now, all the 90s throughout then have been obviously very challenging for the country in general, but luckily, in 2000s, things have shifted, obviously. And I'll speak about R&D expenditure a little later on as well, because that's an important thing to highlight. Well, this is the graph I was speaking about. This is the 1990s expenditure on R&D. And this is the world average we have today. Okay. Do you see me now? I'm getting notifications on video and muting, unmuting.
No, we can see.
Okay. So I want to briefly jump in, sorry for the technical difficulties, on where Armenia is now today, because that's also an important thing sort of to speak about. And the first sort of indicator to understand where the country is and how it makes, you know, what type of importance it gives to science and technology is to have a look at the R&D expenditure and the expenditure on education. And from the numbers, you can see that it's way below from the OECD average. And this definitely demonstrates that the last 30 years, the country hasn't really seen, you know, science and technology as a driver of the economy. So knowledge economy hasn't been a priority for the country. Which we believe is unfortunate, but in any case, this has brought, this has had obviously its impact on the overall ecosystem. Couple of big chunked problems that we have at the moment in the country is obviously quite low productivity of researchers. Yes, we do have a lot of prominent, talented people and enthusiasts who do interesting scientific activities, but at large, when we look at the overall productivity of the country, unfortunately, the researchers are 4 times in average less productive than the world researchers. This obviously also has its impact on the level of high-tech experts, meaning what type of technology we create here in Armenia and then export to the world. Obviously, reasons behind this was that we have a very aging generation of researchers. According to 2018 statistics, over 40% of researchers in the country are above the retirement age. And what this has brought to is that, unfortunately, a lot of scientific schools are disappearing with these people, unfortunately, as the middle-aged researchers is the biggest gap we have currently in the country. And at the same time, the younger generation of researchers is not being, unfortunately, grown or, you know, funded and invested in by the country. And that brings to a really declining number of students and researchers we have in STEM. From 2010 to 2018, the number of students and researchers in STEM have been decreasing up to 33%, which is a very significant drop. And even beyond that, the number of PhD students in STEM have been decreasing every year over 25%. So that said, the human capital, the intellectual capital that has to come in and do the actual innovation, unfortunately, is decreasing, and the system is not really investing in them. Now, with all this realism, which is very important to really assess what the situation on the ground is, there is also a lot of interesting dynamics we have in the country. In the Global Innovation Index, the last sort of 10 years of activities in the country, where we had a lot of interesting players coming in and investing in ICT predominantly, but not only, that has brought a lot the growth of ICT companies, and you can see from the numbers it's quite impressive. In 2000s there were only 50 companies, now we have around 800, and now in GII Armenia has been recognized as an innovation achiever among the middle income countries, which is, I think, quite interesting success for Armenia. So we're 61st among the 131 countries that are in the rank. This definitely shows the potential. This definitely acknowledges the dynamics we have in the country with the companies and the individuals and the researchers doing things on the ground. We have quite interesting success cases that are now conquering the global markets. You all know about Chris, Pixar. Also, when it comes to innovative education, the TUMO Creative Technology Center now conquering also the global sort of arenas, which is very important for Armenia in terms of appearing on the innovation map and proving its potential. The startup ecosystem also has been flourishing in very interesting ways. We do lack deep tech startups, unfortunately, in the country, and whatever we have is not the result yet of what the country is doing, but definitely it shows the potential. These exceptions show the potential, and if the right resources are streamlined into people and more talent and more R&D and more startups, then definitely there is something to accomplish here. Now with this, it's important to understand is the aspiration of having Armenia a global hub for innovation, is it a dream or is it more a destination? And I think it's an important question for different ecosystem players to answer to, because if it's a dream, then obviously whatever we do for that will have a net positive impact. But if it's a destination, that a lot of resources and efforts and most importantly, the directions have to be synchronized, and then the destination can be achieved together. And here I would want to put a little trigger in a positive way. The way we think at FAST is that we believe that Armenia has a potential of the technological so-called leapfrogging, which means that over a lifespan of around 20 years, the country can completely shift its landscape of science, technology, and innovation. Now, this is extremely obviously ambitious, and this requires a big commitment from the government and all the private sector and development organizations. But this is something that is doable, and this is not science fiction. In fact, other countries have already done it. I'm sure many of you know about the Asia Miracle countries, about Baltic countries, Israel's case. And what we have done is an interesting research in terms of benchmarking and understanding what these countries have done, how these can be, how sort of Armenia can learn from these experiences and build around it. And here, a very interesting also lens I want to bring back in here in terms of making the case why we think Armenia has this big, huge potential for completely transforming into an innovative country, is that we believe that from whatever the Soviet legacy is actually offering, this is not a new concept for Armenians. So during Soviet time, what happened, and you can see from the numbers, is that once the Armenian nation sort of was given an infrastructure and access to a market that could be leveraged, the people realized how it could be done. And only over the lifespan of around 20 years, there was a drastic shift on the landscape here on the ground. And the activity has tripled, and all of the interesting things I was sharing about Soviet Union have been accomplished. And a very important component here was the people factor. Most of the successes and most of the institutes, let's say Mergelan Institute, or the fact that we have astrophysics good school here with Humbert Sumyan, were based on the efforts of the people, trying to bring in that market, bring in that knowledge and expertise to Armenia, and that desire to develop it here. So we believe that this is giving us sort of an advantage in terms of having this on our country's resume, to try to create in the current reality what can be done. And in this context, women potential, unfortunately, today in STEM is not properly unlocked, because when we look into the statistics when it comes to entrepreneurs, especially in deep tech and high tech startups, women representation is not very high when it comes to the management. It has a huge potential. We have run a couple of programs, and we see definitely there is a lot of responsiveness to that, so we should definitely invest in that. And also very, very importantly, and with Naira here later on speaking on the panel, it's very much important to tap into the global network that we have. I think we have a very big advantage toward other nations in terms of amazing, talented people we have globally. And we always look on the diaspora more from the cultural perspective and the people factor perspective. But in terms of the intellectual capacity and amazing network these people bring, this is not leveraged in the smartest ways. And we believe if it is done in the smart way, Armenia can get access to resources that could not be even built here locally. So with this said, I think it would be fair to say, with all of the things that are here happening on the ground and all of the legacy that has happened and all of the opportunities that lay ahead of us, the only chance for Armenia to prosper would be to choose the science and technology as the foundation for its prosperity and go toward it. And then we can definitely sort of build that innovative Armenia. Obviously, with women playing their most important role in all of this as a potential that is not properly at the moment unlocked here on the ground. This said, I would want to finish it sort of on this emotional note, saying that we definitely derive from this aspiration, and I'm sure whatever our panelists will be sharing and will be revealing in this discussion will only reiterate that there is this potential that should be untapped. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a wonderful presentation, Suzanna. I want to introduce our panelists now, Naira, Mane, and Nare, to kind of delve more into this discussion. Armenia's had one of the highest percentages of higher education attendees per capita in comparison to other USSR republics, former republics, should I say. And science was a particularly popular field of study. Why is that? Naira, I might start with you.
So what's the question? Why we lost that momentum and potential? Is that the question?
No, why was science such a popular field of study during the Soviet times?
Well, science was popular because it was considered that only the smartest people would be capable of working in science and advancing the state of art. And that's why it was popular, because it was prestigious. It was extremely prestigious by then. If you had committed to do PhD and to work in science and to advance the state of art. And it was kind of always well understood that only the smartest people would be capable of doing it, and it was prestigious. So you thought if you can go and advance the state of art, people would think of you as one of the smartest.
That sounds good. Mane, you want to add to that?
Frankly speaking, I cannot say why it was so popular field of study, but I can say that I wish that it still was a kind of popular field of study, because at this moment we have a lot of young people who are interested in science and they would really love to make their career path in science, but for instance, sometimes they don't see the vision and the challenges that they can solve while going into science in Armenia. So basically they go into computer science and then find a job in the field of high-tech industry, in the tech community. So I really see that a lot of people are interested in, have the enthusiasm, but sometimes they don't see the opportunities in Armenia. That's why maybe they live abroad and study there.
Well, I mean, the issue of not enough people studying STEM, and specifically women, I think is a global issue. And I mean, even in the UK, at some point they were thinking about introducing an incentive, a financial incentive to get people to study STEM. But so let's talk a little bit about education. Can you each tell us a little bit about your education? Naira, again, we'll start with you, and then Mane and Nare, can you tell us how you think things have changed? So Naira, specifically to you, what attracted you to the sciences?
So frankly speaking, I was dreaming about becoming a scientist since 5 years old, because my mom was doing her PhD when I was born, and she left me with her parents to pursue her PhD in St. Petersburg. So when I was living with my grandparents, obviously I was every day asking about mom, and the response was that mom is doing science in St. Petersburg. And the only toys I had as a child were the books that my grandfather was reading for me every day. So I would say I was into sciences maybe since childhood, like preschool age. And that's what kept me going through my life. No regrets so far.
And Nara and Mane, what do you think has changed, and what attracted you to sort of your studies?
Okay, I can go ahead. So we have a comment here for the speakers to introduce themselves. Maybe I can start with introducing myself, maybe for the new joiners. I'm Mane, and the PR and Communications Manager at Service Titan Armenia, which is a startup founded by Armenians. So speaking about my educational background, I am a journalist. I studied journalism, and when I was applying for the university, I could never imagine that one day I would find myself in this tech industry and be part of this innovation. So I was really interested in journalism, so I applied for this department. But while studying, I just discovered a lot of opportunities and a lot of new positions that were appearing, because at that time, for instance, speaking from my perspective, like this copywriting, content design, for instance, there were something that were not familiar to us, not only in Armenia, but in general. So when this tech industry is being evolved, a lot of new positions are coming up. So it's not only about computer science, but also about evolving different other professions. So I guess the main change is that now you not only get your education in the university, but also have the chance to have internships, to have hands-on experience, and then discover your interests and figure out whether you are really in love with what you do at that moment. So now we have the chance to the internships, to work.
Men. So who are some of the women that we should be celebrating in these fields? Mane, do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about
that? Frankly speaking, now, as a journalist who is interviewing also people in this field in science and technology, I'm discovering that we have some women who have some achievements in biology, in different aspects of like science and different fields. So I cannot name them, but I did some interviews with them and we have published them. Maybe later on I can share with you. But the numbers are not increasing, but we still have some women in science that we are celebrating. I don't know how we can go on mentioning the names. If Nare or Naira Hogankimian has the names, but
I think I will leave it for Naira Hogankimian. Maybe.
We had lots of
It's
names,
tough
right? I
question.
think
I think Naira herself is one of those scientists.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I'm
sure.
humbled. I'm humbled. No need to mention me. But we did have names that contributed significantly. And I think I forwarded the list of names to you. And the way to honor them is just maybe, you know, we could maybe introduce a tradition in Armenia of introducing distinguished lectures in the names of these women. And this way we can celebrate their legacy. Like here, quite often I get invited to deliver a distinguished lecture that has a titled name. And the way to remember our famous prominent scientists and especially prominent women, we might consider, for example, introducing distinguished lectures supported by FAST in the name of these distinguished women, and invite different celebrities worldwide to deliver technical lectures, high quality technical lectures, in the name of these famous women that can bring more prestige to Armenia and make at the same time our names recognized. I think it would be a great initiative if us starts on something like this.
Very well said. I like that. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union, then I guess, and Suzanna talked a little bit about this and shared some really interesting data. Armenia's prominence in the sciences waned, but it's found its way back, or it's finding its way back. Can we really call this a renaissance? And would you like to, maybe Naira, I'll start with you, if you could just tell us a little bit about some of those economic reforms that have been taking place over the last sort of 20 odd years and other policies that have helped revive this sector?
You know, I'm not living in Armenia the last 22 years, so let me be honest that I haven't closely followed up on the economic reforms that would have supported policy making for science and technology. Unfortunately, I have just witnessed the worst, that science and technology was just declining because scientists were leaving the country. There was no supporting infrastructure. And one of the main reasons for that was that all the investments that were happening with regards to science and technology in Armenia were within small range. And when it's in a small range, it supports people just to survive, get a few papers, and then they are ready for the big thing, but the big investments were not coming. So people were leaving the country to look for the right opportunities for them. Today we see that the pattern seems to be willing to change, but I haven't yet seen the momentum to be excited and optimistic. I think we need to draw the attention of potential investors more and more towards launching large-scale big projects in Armenia, because big projects give you the opportunity of developing a big vision, planning big, thinking big. When the funding is small, people plan small, think small, their brains just remain small. So it's very important to change the nature of investments in Armenia and attract investments that would be more visionary, that would have correct strategy attached to it, that would be long-term, so that we can attract people with confidence, right? Because people like to plan for a lifetime and not for 1 or 2 years. And when the investments were small, people were just planning 1 or 2 years to get something that would help them to go and find better opportunities abroad. I think we need to do fundamental change now and increase the size of investments so that to build bigger vision, bolder vision, long-term strategy, and revolutionary thinking, kind of high risk, high reward investments. We need now those investments in Armenia desperately, like an oxygen.
So, I mean, I guess to Suzanna's point about leapfrogging and the sort of future vision, you're saying that whatever's gone on is not enough and more needs to be done. So Nare, as somebody who's set up, who's co-founded a business, tell us about what some of those policies look like. How easy was it for you? And did you feel that you had, that there's enough support, state support for this sort of environment?
Maybe as an IT company, yes, but like economic reforms such as the tax-free environment for IT companies, the one-day company registration like flow, and other factors, including the growing startup ecosystem in Armenia and the huge commitment from Armenian diaspora professionals, are serving as a strong fundament for tech companies. We somehow managed to do technology transfer from computer science to high-tech companies. However, there are many other scientific fields that need specific attention from both the private sector and public sector. Recently, like 700 organizations, funds, tech companies, including our company, Everytech, joined their forces under the name of the Gidush. Maybe you heard about Gidush. It means the power of science. And it has clear demand to increase the commitment from the government for science, for a better industry science collaborative environment. I'm afraid that we can't call it Renaissance now, but I hope it will happen soon following the vital steps that must be undertaken. So I can say that as an IT company, you can feel that strength, but we are losing science. We need to take like important steps.
Maybe that's why the tech companies join the efforts to do a lot of initiatives, do kind of pagan science convergence conference, for instance, and other conferences to bring the strengths and the value the diaspora has to Armenia and share the knowledge, and do a lot of initiatives to insist and convince the government to spend more money on science.
Stephen, I know you've got some questions that you want to ask as well.
Yes, so it's actually, I guess, the thing that got me thinking about setting some sort of event up originally was coming across some articles that mentioned things like that, whereas across the world, the percentages of women within tech companies are relatively low, and especially in the US and the UK, to be embarrassingly for us. And you know, maybe only about 14% in engineering roles as well. But in Armenia, that seems to be a lot higher, or at least significantly higher. And what I'm seeing in some of the companies like Embrytech, where Nare is, the percentages are almost half of the staff are actually women, which is very unusual for a UK company. So I was curious, what is behind that? Do you have any thoughts on what is different about Armenia compared to the US and the UK and generally around the world?
So talking about Embrytech, like 2 of our 4 founders are women and 47% of overall company. Actually, we never thought about it until we were asked about the gender balance in our company during some, Forbes interview. Our approach is to gather a strong team with an ambitious mindset, regardless of gender. But still, we are proud to have an iOS developer, data scientist, product designer in our female half of the team. But our company model of having women at C-level is not very common, given the fact that even in IT, the majority of executive positions are still run by males. As Suzanna mentioned, we need more C-level women. And what's behind this trend? Maybe in Armenia, the cultural stereotypes are breaking, and women role models in tech are growing in numbers. That sets an example for younger generations.
Mane, do you want to comment on what's it like at Service Titan?
Maybe we don't have C-level executors, women executors so much in Armenia, but I should mention, maybe taking into account Service Titan's experience as well, we have a lot of women in managerial roles, and we have director of engineering and a lot of engineering managers in Armenia who are women. And as Nara mentioned, unconsciously, I don't know, we don't have the intention to hire women, but we have higher engagement by women. And not I I guess that a lot of people just want to come tech because tech companies create completely different culture in Armenia, and they bring different culture, especially when US-based companies open some offices in Armenia and they bring their culture. So people really want to experience themselves in companies in an industry where they are really valued and appreciated and have opportunities to grow as professionals. And now women, I guess, are more independent, self-assured, and they want to be responsible for their career. So here is the chance for them to experience themselves. So on March 8th, I saw a lot of companies doing some posts on Facebook and LinkedIn, sharing some content about their female employees and the numbers and percentages. So I was surprisingly happy to see the numbers, that the percentages they were sharing, that mentioning that half of the company or 80% of the company are female. So I don't want to make it this about male or female. I'm just happy that a lot of people are coming to tech and want to have this bridge between tech and science somehow.
Naira, I mean, when you started, were you an outsider as a woman in science, or was it quite a normal thing?
No, frankly speaking, my family was very much against me pursuing math for career, math and physics. My father's dream was to have both doctors become doctors, MD. So my sister fulfilled my father's dream. She became an MD. And I was the stubborn one. I decided to go into math and physics. And actually, until now, my father will joke occasionally that I should change my profession and become a doctor. So it wasn't common, right? When I was studying in math, we had 25 people in the group. Only 8 were women. But after the first year or second year, I was the only woman, because either they got married and quit, or they left, changed the profession, whatever. So basically, and I was like the flower of the group. So all the guys were in love with me. They were just carrying me on their hands. I was enjoying the solitude among the men, to be honest. And I never felt anything anti-women in that male-dominated department and the environment. When I first moved to the United States and saw all these events for women diversity, I was surprised that there is kind of a national strategy to increase women participation in STEM fields, because in Armenia we didn't have such a national strategy, and we used to refer to it like a natural choice, that girls play with dolls, guys play with cars. We viewed it and treated it as a matter of natural choice. And I never felt that any man abused me in my profession. I was always well respected, very much loved. And here, all of a sudden, I hear all these stories that women have to fight for their rights, and if we don't increase the participation of women, then it can be bad. And I agree that diversity is very important for maintaining a healthy environment. But the stories that I heard here, how men have abused women in profession, and women have had reduced salaries, women were declined promotions, and this and that. I can't remember such stories from my time of Armenia, to be honest. I have to give our men fair credit. And here I listen to all these stories. I'm invited to these events, and sadly I have nothing to share. So quite often I go to these events and I sit and I have really nothing to share. I never felt any type of discrimination by being a woman in a male-dominated field until now. If there were any instances of unfair treatment, unfortunately, I have to admit, these were done by women in profession, not men. So in some sense, I don't have a bad experience, but I vote for healthy, diverse, balanced environment, because diversity gives us the opportunity to capture all possible opinions. And that's why I vote for diversity. It is not so much for me the difference between men or women. It's more about, for me, capturing all possible opinions, all possible viewpoints, to find the common denominator that will best serve the society. Only under these conditions we can make progress and provide equal opportunities for everybody without discrimination. That's how I view the issue of diversity.
That's wonderful. Now, how do you see the sort of science and innovation sectors growing now going forward? So we're
Here
sort
or
of
in
seeing in Armenia now, where there are, it's sort of being seen as a bit of a sort of technology hub for the region now. I don't know. It seems unclear whether it really is or whether that's just some of the news. But you know,
there is quite a bit
how
of
can
momentum.
that be a positive thing now?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of positive momentum. We have to acknowledge it, like Nare mentioned about the organization called GIDUS, which is the power of science. And people are holding lots of meetings, lots of interviews, lots of constructive meetings with the government and so on to raise awareness about the potential of science. And I have to kind of maybe note that what's important here to emphasize that the benefits of science will not be visible within 1 day or 1 year. One has to indeed make long-term commitments to build scientific foundation, right? So if you want to have certain strategic directions for the country be well developed to support its political independence, its military independence, its economic development, you need to make commitments for 5 to 10 years of investment, serious, substantial, so that people who are engaged in these fields will commit to live in the country and develop their ideas in the benefits of the country. If the commitments are made for 1 or 2 years, I can't be optimistic. I'm sorry, I have again to honestly acknowledge that I need to see long-term commitments in Armenia to be optimistic that the renaissance will take place. And this is very important to bring to the attention of the government. And there are lots of good examples from the world that can be bear on for explaining the issues fundamentally. The communication here is very important.
Yeah. And in terms of setting up companies and things like that, there seem to be a number of startups appearing, a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, which I guess Nare has demonstrated so far. But you know, finance is always an issue. It sounds like there might not be so much of that available within Armenia, but there certainly seem to be things like organizations like SmartGate VC and Hive Ventures that are based, I think, all out in California, seem to be very interested in investing in Armenia at the moment. So is that where the funding, if you want to start a business, is that where you need to go to look for the funding? And I guess male and female entrepreneurs, do you have equal access to it in that sense as well? Oh, you're muted, Nare.
You're muted. Nare, you are muted.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
There are 2 ways of funding your startup in Armenia. First of all, I want to establish one universal truth. There are always more money than fundable startups. You need to learn, grow, and show the market demand and find the right people, investors who believe in the same vision. So for growing and learning, I believe Armenia Startup Academy could be an excellent place, and there are many other incubators and pre-acceleration programs in Armenia. One should start with if she wants to start a new business. As you mentioned, there are a few VCs like SmartGate VC, Hive Ventures, Granite Ventures. There are angel investor groups in Armenia, like Angel Investor Club of Armenia and VANA. Secondly, especially for hardware startups and like R&D, startups doing R&D, grants are an excellent source of money. It doesn't mean that there is no access to money like out of Armenian funds. Armenian from diaspora started to become angel investors and mentors for startups. The knowledge and the experience they share are priceless. Like also, for instance, Tech investor board is very diverse. We have non-Armenian angels, funds, and we received grants from Europe, for instance. So It's not a big issue. The biggest issue to find right like market fit and like loving customers.
Do you find those in Armenia, or do you need to look at overseas for the customers? I mean, I guess
So,
the US is a big market, and you've got still close relationships with Russia, which I'm guessing is also a large market.
so for our product, we are mainly focused on USA, especially on California. And like we have investors from California and like Hero House, which is the Smart Gate initiative. Hero House recently was opened in Glendale. So we have some hub in Glendale as well. So it's becoming easy to have like customer development in California.
Did anyone else want to comment on that?
As Nara mentioned, this Hero House and the hub that we have already in Glendale, this is something you were asking whether Armenia can have any impact, regional impact, or not only global impact. So this is really great to see some Armenian products to go to US and have impact there. So they have this acceleration program not only for Armenian startups, but it's open for the US-based startups as well. So this is something that we can bring our culture to the US and also take their culture and involve as much investors as possible. And also, for instance, if we have big companies like, for instance, our company Service Titan which is a US-based company and has a huge portfolio of investors, and when they see this company succeeds in Armenia and the investors see that this company has the impact, they become, even though they don't know where Armenia is, they are really becoming interested in getting to know more about Armenia, about the company, about their R&D in Armenia, and then want to have more offices in Armenia, and they want to invest more in Armenia. So whenever big companies somehow prove successful, that they can become successful while having offices in Armenia, this becomes kind of motivation for investors to deep dive and be more interested in Armenia.
Are you seeing that as a bit of a trend yet, or is it starting? Okay, so Naira, you sort of got a long background now as a scientist. How did you find your sort of education in Armenia helped you to get where you are today? Was your education mostly in Armenia, or was it when you moved?
I got my undergraduate education in the Yerevan State University that you see in my background, and then I did PhD in Moscow. And then I had a few different scholarships in Germany and France before in 1998 I got an invitation to move to US. And since then, for the past 22 years, I have been in US. My education in Armenia, helped me not so much in terms of knowledge. I had huge knowledge gaps. I cannot give credit for the knowledge, but my education in Armenia, and it has mostly also to do maybe with my family setting, because my mom is a very demanding woman and she's a perfectionist, and we had always to be the best of the best. So the bar for hitting the highest grades was really high. When I was in that university, we had only 1 or 2 students in the whole class that would have got the grade A or A plus, what we call it here. It was very hard to get the top grade. There was no grade inflation by then. But it does not mean yet that we were getting indeed top education in terms of knowledge. One of the reasons that I left Armenia had to do fundamentally with my level of curiosity that I was never able to satisfy in Armenia, neither in Moscow, because while studying in a math department, I liked to always ask questions. Why do we do what we do? Why is the problem formulation stated in a specific way? Why do we make these assumptions? And the responses I was getting in Armenia and later also in Moscow was that, okay, this is a pretty problem formulation. Some famous mathematicians state it as an important problem and so on. I was never getting end-to-end response. And that's what brought me eventually to America. My scientific curiosity, I always wanted to have an end-to-end answer to every question, to understand the big picture. Why do we formulate the problem this way? Why do we make these assumptions? Where do they pay off for us for this? And what is the end purpose of it? And only landing in United States, I was able to complete this cycle for me. So now I know, why do I formulate the problem this way? What's at the core of it, and so on. In this sense, the education was incomplete, both in Armenia and in Moscow, fundamentally incomplete. However, when I was, for example, taking a math class, the bar for getting an A or A+ in the class was extremely high. We had to solve challenging problems to get the excellent grade. In that sense, where the bar was, it was helpful. But in terms of giving complete knowledge, no, we had fundamental gaps in the system. And that had to do maybe with the entire former Soviet Union, which is one of the reasons why the entire science of the former Soviet Union didn't survive the modern challenge in the environment of the modern challenges. So I think we have a huge collapse, not in Armenia, but also across the Russian scientists, across what happened in the former Soviet Union, in the post-Soviet era, when already the environment was becoming more and more competitive. The science itself did not survive because it could not answer these end-to-end questions from A to Z. So unfortunately, I witnessed all that and I experienced it myself.
Tatiana?
Sure. Yeah, I guess, thank you, Naira. That's really interesting. That's really interesting to hear, and a nice analysis of some of the weaknesses of the former Soviet Union. I guess, Naira, maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you experienced while you were trying to set up your business in Armenia.
Muted, Naira.
I'm sorry, so I don't want to interrupt the other speakers. So can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
So I used to have my own outsource company during my university years, but it wasn't enough for me. I was lacking the challenge, like authenticity and magic. Every idea started from like one question. Is it possible to create wearable technology to know when your weight crawls up on you? Today, every tech is making that into reality with the vision of turning all shoes into predictive health tools through measurable wellness. When I got into tech, that was the time when the tech scene was growing in Armenia. Maybe it's better to say when the tech and startup ecosystem was being established. So I wouldn't say it was a challenge, it was more fun, new connections, new network, new bright-minded and ambitious people always there for you, ready to help. It's also worth to mentioning that tech in Armenia is the industry where integration happens smoother and easier than one can imagine. When it comes to challenges, hardware is hard, but building hardware products in Armenia is even harder. The lack of materials, possibilities, hardware labs, make it challenging. But on the other hand, it gives us an opportunity to be more creative and implement out of the box programs. Accept the challenge and experience something unknown and unexpected. Another challenge that we already mentioned is like I would like to highlight is the absence of the environment for collaborating with the local scientific groups, which forced us to do a kind of PhD with the whole team. Like sometimes we laugh, we say that we are doing PhD with the whole team because we are working on the innovative technology. It is the capturing and analyzing the biomedical data coming from the human food. So it will be easier to have collaborations with science, improve the science and industry connection. And I think the challenge is mainly there.
Thank you. Mani, I mean, you're a mentor and you've worked for a number of tech-related companies over the years, and even as a journalist. So I guess you get a sort of a bird's eye view of a lot of what Nara was talking about and what Nara is talking about. So what are some of the trends that you're seeing, and for the better or worse? I mean, for example, have we sort of progressed out of that that sort of old system that existed before Armenia's independence? What are the sort of good things and the bad things that you're seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, it's already, I guess, 3 or 4 years that I have been writing about tech-related topics, tech startups, and I have decided one day to just look through the articles I have been writing and see what has happened with those startups, whether they still thrive or they have already disappeared. That's really interesting for me to have some statistics. But what I should mention is that when just tech started booming here in Armenia, most of the tech companies founders were lacking the experience and we're lacking the business thinking, because we had never had the opportunity. Basically, most of them were more technology focused than business focused. So we had this gap and we had to fill this gap. So through some acceleration programs, which I really appreciate that we had the chance to participate in a lot of companies. For instance, the Berkeley Skydeck acceleration program, where we have a certain person who tries to find the Armenian startups who can go to the US, to Silicon Valley, and spend some time there and get to know their culture, have some mentors, instructors from the big companies and salespeople from that company. So these acceleration programs gave us opportunity to enhance our mindset, word outlook, and now we have company founders which are more experienced and more ready to challenges. And also when it comes to tech and science, a lot of people, like young people who are studying and they don't see the profit, the vision of going into science, sometimes they just quit and go to tech, as I mentioned. But as now we have some startups like Crispies or Super Annotators, young people see that they can go into science, and then their research paper or their PhD can be a kind of basis for founding a startup and having more foundation. So this kind of stories are really inspiring for people to see the connection between science and tech. And yeah, so I really see the progress, the change of mindset, and we are becoming more tolerant to failure because we Armenians are very success oriented, which I really appreciate. But now we are becoming when I say failure tolerant, I mean they really take the challenges, take the risk to do a lot of things without thinking about the final results. So I really like. Sorry?
To take no's as an answer, as a challenge.
Yeah, and also the culture, the way, when I see how now our founders and people communicate with investors, I really see the change. Previously, whenever they were getting any no from an investor, they were about quitting their startup and leaving the country. But now they are getting no's and they feel proud getting the no's, and they say that we should be stronger to get more investors, to find the right ways to communicate with them. And as Suzanna mentioned, maybe this is also because the network we have, Armenians, for instance, in the US, if someone from Armenia goes to US as a business trip or just to discover more opportunities, we have a community there which really cares about the newcomer, new joiner, and they have some welcome dinners. They have some meetups with the community to help you to get engaged with people and introduce the right people you should be in contact with. So maybe diaspora and the network really matters here to have the changes.
I think if I can chime in here, I really share whatever the panelists are saying here. And an important thing is those exceptions, and these are currently exceptions, are actually having a very turbulent impact in Armenia. Armenia is so tiny that every success case and every person that drives some things can really impact and have like sort of like a spillover effect with whatever they're doing. Every small success story, every single exception in terms of like founders of CRISP, they are an exception that they decided to do it here and stay here. Founders of Super Annotate AI, same thing here. And they push it and they want to do it for so many reasons. They have all the ways to go. And same will be with Embry, I'm sure, and same is with Service Titan. They're all the easiest ways to go and not try the effort here because the opportunity is late before the person or the team that wants to do something. If there's a committed team, there is a committed and dedicated team who really, really knows what they want, all the doors open. There is money, there is intellectual capital, there are a lot of people who want to help for free and who can open other doors and all of that. So those success cases, I think, are very important to speak about more and very important to start showing from early on ages to school kids to make sort of, if I can say, science sexy, because if you go and ask people on the street how they imagine a scientist, you know, the stereotypical responses you will receive, unfortunately, have nothing to do with the current, you know, profile of a scientist, that the world is scientists are the most respected people. They are the most successful people, and they should be perceived like that here in Armenia as well. And I think an important thing is also not to mix science, STEM, and innovation with just ICT, which is one tiny thing we do actually in Armenia currently for so many reasons. And you will see the same thing in terms of like women participation in ICT. Yes, it is high if you compare to other countries. Go to other STEM fields, physics, they are very underrepresented. So it's an important thing to speak about STEM and deep tech in broader sense and really showcase, you know, successes, because they can really inspire others and they do have a big spillover effect. And again, I think if there hasn't been a single person in Armenia who decided to do something and it didn't work, first time, second time, third time, if there is a sort of that dedication, that you can definitely push. It's about triggering that desire to pursue scientific career or, you know, pathway.
And I think, you know, we kind of touched on the need for government to really do more. I mean, Naira, you've been very explicit on that, and I think that I'm hoping that, you know, there are others that are out there that are going to be listening to this and listening to you, because we do need to encourage more. And I'll focus more on the STEM area, which you both touched upon. But I guess, and maybe Mani, you kind of answered this question, but you know, the success stories will sort of provide a case study for more, to encourage more. But are there enough competitor roles for these individuals when they leave school? I don't know if you want to sort of very briefly answer that question. Then I think we're going to move into some of our Q&A questions that are coming through as well.
So are we speaking about the opportunities for new graduates who graduate and find opportunities? You know, these private sectors, like private companies, try to take over this responsibility from the government, because as Naira mentioned, we don't have this strong and solid, I guess, educational system in Armenia, but we really have companies and we have institutions that really care about this. And when they find the need, they try to somehow fill this need. And I can speak about it starting from not only universities, but schools as well. We have Teach for Armenia, we have TUMO, we have ARMAT, we have COAF, we have a lot of institutions that try to break a lot of stereotypes especially from the perspective of engaging more girls, women. And you know, there are a lot of barriers in different regions in Armenia. Like, for instance, those who study in some regions of Armenia, and in the scope of the Teach for Armenia, they want to come in Armenia and participate for Sevan startup, for instance, they are not allowed sometimes. So these teachers need to change their mindset, to talk to their parents and find the opportunities for these people to get engaged in this stuff. So I really appreciate the role of these institutions who fundamentally try to make a change. And when it comes to the opportunities, a lot of companies create opportunities for students to do internships, and sometimes they are like, they have some free webinars, seminars, trainings for students to be involved and to try themselves, to experience themselves, and then to decide which path they want to choose. So at this moment, we need to communicate all the positions, professions that they are appearing now, and the new ones especially. Yeah, basically most of the companies try to work with the universities to hope that we're going to have success from this perspective.
May I just add one more comment, because you referred to my mention that I was very explicit about the approach why government should be looking into it seriously. I have heard the government raising this question many times in different forums. What would be our benefit, or I don't know, our return on investment if we invest in science today? Tell us what we will have in 2 years, 5 years, and so on. If they get back to me and ask this question to me, I will give them an answer without thinking a second. In 5 years, you will have 2,000 more people whose day-to-day job over the last 5 years was academic research, which means they exercised analytical thinking with the objective of improving scholarship. And if in 2 to 5 years, 5,000 more people in your country had a day-to-day job in a completely different direction than what they do today, the country will have completely different quality and image. And that's the answer. The rest, economic development, military independence, political independence, are the consequences of that, because the quality of people changes. But they don't ask me this question. I don't know why. The government maybe doesn't want to listen to my opinion. But if they get back to me and ask this question, this would be my answer. You invest in people. And when the people change, the country changes. And not come and say, okay, if I invest in 5 years, what do I get? Do I get an electric car or what? That's a wrong question to be asked. When you are investing in science and education, the output, the byproduct of it are people, okay? And when people change, everything changes. They shouldn't view it like, what is I'm going to get out of it? But no, you're not going to get a spacecraft. Even if you invest for 30 years in science and technology in Armenia, you won't build a spacecraft in Armenia, because worldwide it won't be viewed a strategic place for deploying such systems. But you'll have people of different quality whose day-to-day job had forced them to do analytical thinking. And that's already a big achievement for the country. That's my answer.
I fully support Naira's point here. I think the only and biggest asset Armenia has is human capital and its potential. And if we are really fair, it's not unlocked properly. So there is much, much more. And definitely government's role here is immense. When I was speaking about the government expenditure on R&D and education, there is a World Bank stat for over like 20 years that clearly shows a correlation between the expenditure on education and R&D and its impact on like GDP. So there is even stats like that would say, if every dollar spent on education generates another 20 sort of contributing to GDP. And if you invest 1% into R&D, you will get in average 2.2 increase contribution sort of to GDP. And this is average statistics over 20 years, over a huge span of countries. I fully agree here with Naira in terms of, very linear thinking oftentimes on different things, as like more like, oh, I give you a dime and what do you give me back for that type of a thinking, which doesn't work when it comes to science, because that's not how it works. And indeed, humans are the most important thing, sort of element here, because they produce the innovation, not anything else but them. And they, if they are educated, if they have the environment and the leverage sort of to be creative and do it, and infrastructure, that's only when it works.
No, thank you for that. And I mean, on a personal note, I fully agree. Tadevik Naramyan is asking about the importance of strong, well, sorry, Suzanna, you talked about the importance of a strong global diaspora network in order to strengthen and develop the Armenian innovation startup ecosystem. What are the most effective measures Armenian researchers and other professionals in the diaspora can do to help foster this ecosystem? I don't know who would like to answer that question.
Yeah, I can answer, at least from whatever we are trying to do. Definitely, this is sort of one big and important area that needs so much more resources put into it. First of all, we with our experience already show that we have a couple of programs where we would integrate the diaspora scientists into leading actual research projects here on the ground, both for junior scientists and for more senior scientists, and it definitely works. So, you know, scientists abroad, and there are several different dimensions of this. There are a lot of postdoc students who would be interested to get engaged here and mentor and help the undergrad and master students grow here on the ground and sort of complement the gaps we have in education and the expertise we have, or I don't have here on the ground, especially when it comes to STEM education, through the diaspora professionals, bringing in visiting professor, bringing in, you know, scientists who can lead projects, and also making sure they can, you know, advise different startups when it comes to actually producing deep tech solutions. For example, we have an interesting experience where we have been connecting the local startups with sort of key opinion leaders or field experts from all over the world, who were all diaspora and Armenians, who would help these teams really make sure, you know, their product will have a potential on the global market, because the local market is very tiny. So you need, obviously, the tech startups to be thinking outside. And for the local people who haven't had an opportunity to work in other markets, obviously, to get that market feel, to understand what the world will need and what can be scalable, they need all of these connections. So really creating sustainable programs where the diaspora scientists and entrepreneurs can have a direct link to the entrepreneurs, students, researchers here on the ground, where they can transfer the knowledge, not going and asking for money, but actually for the knowledge and for their time, which is the most valuable thing. Well, Naira here sitting, and she's on our board of advisors already for 3 years. We're speaking, you know, about so many solutions and trying to understand how we can, you know, create a framework where a person like her would be able to allocate some time to actually really babysit people here. And I don't mean in an arrogant way, but in the sense that we really have such a gap in terms of the knowledge that people here on the ground have with so many professionals. And the only way to close it is try to bridge these people in smarter ways.
Naira, Mane, and Naira, do any of you want to add anything to that? No? Well then, sorry, go ahead, Naira.
So speaking about the mentors, we really appreciate the help of the mentors from our diaspora. So in our advisory board, we have scientists and technology people and business people, and it's really priceless. So the biggest investment in Armenia, it is the knowledge investment into startup owners, people who think about starting business, even people who are just doing R&D. They really need mentors and supervisors from abroad, because we have huge potential in Armenia, but we are not there yet. So like have like self-fulfilling environment. So we need really the knowledge that diaspora has.
Thank you.
I can add just the mentor is very important.
Ahead.
Today, when Suzanna mentioned that they have a gap of the middle-aged people in Armenia in science and technology. That's maybe my generation that went to look for their opportunities. I think the mentorship is critically important. When people ask me in the United States, how did you achieve what you have achieved? I always say thanks to my mentors in this country and thanks to my students who invested their young years into the directions that I led them to lead with the help of my mentors here. So mentorship is very important and I can't emphasize it enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a question here from Mashinka Hagopyan, who I think is just leaving now, but she was curious to hear about the role of AI and ML specifically and how that will play, whether it will play a feature in Armenia's ecosystem. So I don't know if somebody would like to help answer that question.
I guess if I can take a lead to answer this question, then we'll let Nare talk. So people are today fascinated by AI and ML because it helped us to make lots of technologies very well accessible to people, right? You buy anything on Amazon, it will suggest you choices that you may like. You type on your iPhone, it brings up the words that you can choose and so on. So it became very quickly very popular. However, if we think carefully, AI or ML, it's a type of estimation algorithm, estimation and prediction. It's a suite of estimation and prediction algorithms that are very important, but they cannot be at the core of serious technologies, right? If Nare is today building these Embry insoles for shoes, they need a piece of hardware to get started, right? There are other things that are fundamentally important that have to be well-defined, well-crafted, durable material, this and that, before any AI or ML algorithm can be inserted into it, and then it has to work well. So AI and ML, I think, are going through some hype that is already saturating. It has exhausted its limits, and we need here new fundamental breakthroughs. I think we're operating on the limits of the existing physical hardware, and until we get a new breakthrough, maybe through quantum computing or through some other directions that are potentially promising and have the potential for revolutionizing the future, we won't be able to go to the next stage in this fourth industrial revolution, fifth industrial revolution, and so on. So AI ML is just one dimension. It can't be all. That's all I want to say. There is a hype around it. That's my personal opinion.
So I totally agree with Naira, and I would like to mention that if you have noticed, I never used like we are doing like great fluctuation analysis with ML or with AI because they are buzzwords everyone uses now, but yeah, they're just a tool to get like to solve the problem for the users. Like whether you are using AI or ML or something else. But I also agree with having like personal hardware because like hardware limits software, and we should concentrate on making like our own hardware and have our R&D like in specific hardware fields.
There's two questions here which I'm going to merge. One from Garo Berberian and another from Nora. Well, I call her Nuritza, so I'm going to call her Nuritza Matosyan. Garo's talking about how Armenia suffered greatly from corruption under the oligarchs and who operated a very patriarchal system. So his question is around how can women function and succeed in this structure, and Nuritza's question kind of goes further. And I mean, first of all, she wanted to sort of say that, you know, you're all shining examples of how effective and ambitious Armenian women are and can be, but given the manifest discrimination and abuse against women in the country expressed in the government, how can less privileged families and women hope to help their daughters and young women have a fair chance? How can we most effectively change that male dominant culture? So I don't know whether who would like to sort of take these questions. I've kind of merged them into one. Who would like to go first?
Nare, maybe you should answer, because you are the Armenian woman today with a child, right? So what would you do to influence your child?
So I don't know. So maybe we first of all, we need to stop calling engineering, cars, and even maths are boys' things. As a mother of a 5-year-old lady, her name is Luce, I have converted the challenges of being a mom into tech business into the environment for her to grow up with exploring and experimenting in STEM. I believe that encouraging women to be in STEM and to be confident and whatever we want from the women nowadays, it starts from the family first. I can't speak more about how government can change it, because I don't know. So I can't give some advice to government, but I think we should start from our families and from noticing bad things and trying to fix that things by ourselves. So I'm relying only on individuals.
And from that perspective, if I can move forward with these questions, for instance, we have AGBU in Armenia, and as I know that they target some vulnerable groups of women who have suffered this abuse, I don't know, who don't have the chance to work or didn't have the chance to work, and they target as women. They involve them in a lot of projects they have right now, because there are some projects we are now working together on, or I would love to work with them. So they just try to engage them in business, and even from young ladies or women from Marsis or from Yerevan, they try to organize some trainings for them, or even pay for the trainings for them to come to tech, and then they try to find some companies they can collaborate with and find internships and then job for them. So I guess somehow such kind of initiatives can be helpful to raise the awareness and make some changes. And as I have already mentioned, we have these institutions like Teach for Armenia or TUMO, who somehow try to change from the beginning the way children think and teenagers spend time on. So they try to engage them in more productive things, and creating robots or playing with robots, and then they go home, and I guess in their turn they try to educate their parents if they see the need. So maybe these institutions and initiatives can be somehow helpful, because I contribute to HED, where you can read a lot of things about the abuse of the violation of women, and at the same time you can read a lot about the tech, about involvement and engagement of women in tech and science. So we have both sides in Armenia, and maybe even this coverages or illustrations and storytelling can be helpful to inspire people.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to add anything? Well, I want to say thank you to all of you, because this has been a really informative and interesting discussion. I think that just listening to all of you speak, there is obviously an environment. I mean, FAST wouldn't be there if they weren't the opportunities, and very much, Naira, having someone like yourself mentoring young people, I think is quite an inspiration for the sector. So, I'd like to say thank you very much to all our participants and speakers, and Suzanna for the presentation. For anyone interested, the project that Mane was talking about is the Empower Her project by AGBU, who are doing great things for female entrepreneurs as well. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Nick, who's going to close the evening. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, Tatiana, and thank you to all our speakers in the panel tonight for a really fantastic event. Just before we let you all go, just a few things to remind you of. So the first is that we're running a fundraiser here at the Armenian Institute to digitize and make an online catalogue of our collection. So please do give generously if you're able. We also have a survey which we're running at the moment to improve our events and to find ideas for new sources of funding and new kinds of events, new areas that we can look into. So if you have any perspectives or views that you'd be willing to share with us, we'd really appreciate that. And as we said, this event was part of a series for International Women's Day for Women's History Month. You can find our previous events on our YouTube website, our YouTube account rather, and you can also attend our final event next Thursday with the authors of the recipe book La Vache, where we'll be learning how to make Jingalot's hats. And you can also see the content that we've been putting out for International Women's Day on our podcast series, Zana Zan Sounds, which you can find out more about on our website. But back to tonight, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. If you have any feedback, then please do use leave it in the feedback form. I've just put the link into the chat. And otherwise, thank you so much again to Stephen and to Tatiana for putting this event together, to FAST Foundation for co-hosting it with us, and to Suzanna for joining us, and to Nare, Naira and Mane for a fantastic panel. It really was great, and thank you so much for staying with us. I know it's very late now in Yerevan, so we'll let you go, but thank you, friends. Barika Shed.